San Jose Project. The U.S. military conducted the San Jose Project, which involved the testing of a variety of chemical and biological agents on human subjects. The initiative was founded in the Cold War context, during which the United States was preoccupied with the development and assessment of chemical and biological weapons. In order to prevent public scrutiny, these experiments were conducted on San Jose Island, a remote location. The chemical agents that were tested included nerve agents such as VX and sarin, blister agents such as mustard gas and lewisite, and certain biological agents. Military personnel and, in some cases, local civilians participated in the tests, often without their knowledge. Numerous soldiers were misled into believing that the experiments were part of their training or safety protocols, and some actually felt compelled to participate. The military frequently selected participants based on their race, as they believed that individuals with darker complexion would be more resilient to the adverse effects of the chemical agents. There were numerous methods by which participants in the San Jose Project were exposed to chemical agents. They inhaled the gases, allowed them to contact their skin, and in certain instances, ingested them. When these agents came into contact with the epidermis, they could immediately induce blisters. Individuals who inhaled the gases experienced severe respiratory complications, including coughing, wheezing, and long-term lung tissue injury. Additionally, numerous individuals experienced excruciating skin injuries, including rashes and burns. Mental effects were also observed, including memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and elevated anxiety in certain individuals. One of the most significant issues with the San Jose Project was that the participants did not provide informed consent. A significant number of them were unaware of the potential hazards associated with participating in the experiments. The U.S. government frequently attempted to conceal the results due to the health issues that the participants were experiencing following the tests. The project was kept private, and as a result, individuals who contracted illnesses as a result of the experiments were initially denied any assistance or financial compensation for their illnesses. Tuskegee Syphilis Study. This study, sometimes referred to as the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis, sought to determine the effects of untreated syphilis on African American men, since the researchers believed that Black men were less likely to seek treatment or be aware of the risks associated with syphilis. They believed they were getting free medical care when they were told they were being treated for poor blood, a term used to describe a variety of ailments, and there were about 600 men participating, 399 of whom had syphilis and 201 of whom did not. In actuality, the researchers chose to see how syphilis developed untreated, therefore they did not administer appropriate therapy. Many patients experienced substantial health difficulties as a result of the study, including untreated syphilis sequelae such as heart problems, brain damage, and other serious disorders. Many families had to deal with the long-term effects, and some men suffered from these issues for years before they died. To continue their study, the researchers kept penicillin from the men even after it was discovered to be a successful cure for syphilis in the 1940s. By the time the study concluded in 1972, 100 people had died from syphilis or its consequences, making the mortality toll from the study noteworthy. Furthermore, as a direct consequence of the unethical tactics of the study, 19 children were born with congenital syphilis, and 40 spouses of the sick males also developed syphilis. The study's unethical procedures were first revealed to the public in 1972 by a whistleblower, which sparked widespread indignation and led to the study's abrupt termination. United Kingdom's Death Island experiment. Also referred to as the British biological warfare tests, its objective was to investigate the potential applications of germs in British special military operations and warfare. Anthrax, a highly lethal bacterium, was used in one of the most important investigations carried out by the British government on isolated islands, specifically Grunard Island in St. Kilda. This set of experiments was carried out as part of Operation Vegetarian, a plan that was eventually abandoned but involved spreading anthrax-laced linseed cakes over the German countryside in an attempt to infect German animals and so destroy food supply. The government started by dispersing anthrax spore dosages on Grunard Island in 1942 to observe how they dispersed and impacted living things. The island was severely contaminated by this spill, rendering it unusable for many years for both humans and animals. Under the false pretense that these examinations were a normal component of training, military men were coerced into taking them. The majority of soldiers later reported severe health problems, such as severe skin infections and breathing difficulties, following their experimentation. Other bacteria, such as tularemia and brucellosis, were also examined by the British government to see how they affected both humans and animals. Nazi twin experiments. During World War II, twins were used in Nazi experiments in concentration camps, particularly Auschwitz. These experiments were conducted under the direction of the Angel of Death, a German physician named Dr. Josef Mengele. He found twins fascinating and thought that studying them could provide valuable insights into genetics and inheritance. Mengele frequently conducted cruel and lethal experiments. He removed organs and amputated limbs during anesthesia-free surgeries. To compare their responses, he, for instance, injected one twin with a sickness while maintaining the other twin's health. To observe how their bodies recovered, some twins had their limbs broken. Mengele also attempted to create artificial Siamese twins by stitching them together without anesthesia and measured the maximum amount of pain a human could withstand. Mengele not only operated on twins, but also subjected their eyes to excruciating trials. In an attempt to alter the color of their eyes, he injected dye into them, which frequently resulted in blindness or permanent damage. Because Mengele was interested in concepts of racial purity, he also measured and took pictures of the twins to examine their physical characteristics. Mengele used over 1,500 sets of twins in his experiments at Auschwitz. Only perhaps 200 of them made it through the war. Families were frequently split up, and many twins were taken from their parents when they got to the camp. Many survivors suffered from chronic physical and mental health issues as a result of the trauma they endured during the conflict. Unit 731. Japan used a covert facility called Unit 731 to conduct human experiments during World War II. Under the command of General Shiro Ishii, this unit conducted experiments on thousands of people, including Chinese civilians, POWs, and children, by infecting them with diseases like cholera, plague, and anthrax in order to examine the effects on human health. The unit operated in occupied China from 1937 to 1945 and focused on biological and chemical warfare research. For example, researchers performed vivisections on live participants without anesthesia to investigate their organs, blood, and bodily processes in real time, and even infected people with plague bacteria to track the disease's progression and record its symptoms. In order to evaluate the consequences of exposure to cold, some victims were frozen, and others were exposed to high temperatures in order to observe heat-related disorders. In order to examine the effects on human anatomy, experiments were carried out utilizing a variety of weaponry, in which participants were shot or exposed to explosives. To investigate the impact of these conditions on health, some patients were even subjected to dehydration and famine. Furthermore, in order to examine the consequences and course of infections like gonorrhea and syphilis without therapy, some individuals were purposefully infected with these illnesses. One especially gruesome series of tests involved removing organs from people and keeping them alive to observe the effects of the surgery. Many also had serious bodily injuries as a result of being exposed to intense pressure, which mimics circumstances seen at high elevations. Since many victims were executed after the experiments to remove any witnesses, it is estimated that these experiments caused tens of thousands of deaths. Although there were about 3,000 participants in the experiments directly, there may have been many more casualties overall. Some members of Unit 731 were granted amnesty from prosecution after the war, in return for giving the Allied forces their research data. Human vivisections in ancient Greece. Human vivisection, or performing surgeries and dissections on live patients, was a practice that originated in ancient Greece and was mainly used for medical research and education. Those who worked under the aegis of the developing medical science, such as Herophilus of Chalcedon and Erasistratus, significantly enhanced this technique. Many people consider Herophilus to be the father of anatomy. He performed vivisections on convicted criminals, offering a unique chance to observe the human body in action. He would dissect the body during these procedures while the patient was still alive, enabling him to watch how different organs worked. He reportedly cut into nerves and observed the accompanying muscle contractions to analyze the nervous system, for example. He also performed tests on the brain, taking it out of a living person's skull to examine its connections and structure. Herophilus's contemporary Erasistratus likewise used vivisection to expand his knowledge of human anatomy. In order to study the beating heart and blood flow, he would open the chest cavity of living people as part of his vast research on the heart and vascular system. He frequently cut off veins and arteries during these tests in order to study blood flow up close, which caused the participants to suffer extreme trauma and blood loss. Erasistratus sought to ascertain the function of blood in the body, and his techniques frequently produced graphic displays of agony as the patients writhed in agony throughout these intrusive operations. The Chomera. The primary objective of the Soviet Union's covert Chomera laboratory, which was set up in the 1920s, was to create an untraceable poison that could kill adversaries without being discovered during autopsies. Researchers at Chomera concentrated on a variety of poisons, including as botulinum toxin, strychnine, and ricin, in order to accomplish this goal. A large number of the victims were dissidents, political prisoners, or others seen to be dangers to the government. To start, researchers would inject patients with ricin, which would result in vomiting, excruciating stomach pain, and frequently, the victim's death. To determine whether they could kill without drawing suspicion, the researchers examined poisons combined with food or drink in addition to injections. In one instance, a person contracted botulinum toxin, which paralyzed them and prevented them from breathing. With no intention of assisting the victim, the researchers merely watched intently while the subject struggled and fought for their life, noting their observations. Scientists studying cholera also experimented with combinations of several poisons, including morphine and strychnine, which caused excruciating muscle spasms and convulsions. Before passing away from a lethal dosage, victims may have violent reactions and seizures that last up to 15 minutes. Furthermore, to find out how stress and anxiety would increase the potency of poisons, certain subjects were kept in total isolation and subjected to harsh circumstances. More than 90% of the patients did not survive the examinations, according to the laboratory's thorough records of the trials. The Aversion project converting homosexuals to heterosexuality was the goal of the Aversion project, a covert initiative. The South African government took drastic steps to alter the victim's sexual orientation since they thought homosexuality was a mental disease. Electric shock therapy was among the most unsettling techniques. During this process, patients received unpleasant electric shocks while viewing pictures of guys. According to some stories, individuals suffered severe skin burns after receiving more than 150 shocks in a single session. Chemical aversion therapy, which employed the medication apomorphine, was another horrifying technique. In addition to causing extreme nausea and forced vomiting, this medication exposed volunteers to explicit pictures of gay behavior. Victims occasionally choked on their own vomit after experiencing uncontrollable vomiting. This was intended to establish a connection between same-sex desire and sickness. A variety of psychological impacts were described by Aversion project survivors. Some victims suffered from severe anxiety, despair, and flashbacks. According to reports, many survivors experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and some even made suicide attempts as a result of their ordeals. Although precise figures are difficult to ascertain, estimates indicate that hundreds of people received these treatments. Join my Discord channel if you would want to talk about this video or offer a suggestion for the future one.